Thank you, Nicholas. That was great. And this is what's going to be great today. I'm going to get to read this without feeling silly about having only about 4 people in here. So this is time for the welcome, which will be nice today. Welcome to our community church, Unitarian Universalist. I'm your worship associate. It doesn't have my name here, but I'll fill it in. Sally Jackson. And it is a joy to be with you, virtually and in person today. So who are we as community church? We're a progressive, open-minded, and inclusive religious community. We welcome all who are on a spiritual search for truth and meaning. Ours is a faith in action as we do the work of the social justice and elevate compassion in our quest to live ethically, recognizing the inherent worth and dignity of every being. People, look to your weekly email for announcements. Okay, now, I've got a couple of things to do here. First, it is still Endowment Month, so we're going to have the chairperson of our endowment ministry is going to give you a little. Here's Jolie Bond.
So good morning, I'm Jolie Bond, like she said, chair of the endowment ministry. You'll have been hearing a little bit about our endowment every Sunday this month, and today I want to discuss how our grant money was spent this year. We provided funds to the Second Harvest Food Bank, which has a good record of feeding people. They really reached out. They're actually called Second Harvest Food Bank of Greater New Orleans and Acadiana now, and they reached out to that region of the state that was hit so hard by hurricanes to feed people. We also provided funds to the Rosa Fund, which helps provide grocery money to one particular worthy family here in the New Orleans area. We were continuing our support for the New Orleans Community Resource Guide for Resistance and Renewal. It is produced by volunteers. It was started by volunteers from Celsher and Common Ground a while back. Our grant mostly covers the printing, and it should be available in a printed form to us soon. It's also online, and the links to the online version are in our weekly email blast. But they do print some copies and distribute them throughout the city. Then the other thing we continue to support is our Red Flame Hunters Indian group. There's a gentleman, Ed Buckner, who helps mentor. Is it boys and girls, or just boys? Boys. Traditionally, Indian tribes, I think, are either one or the other. Anyway, we provided some funds for them to do the feathering and beading of their costumes, and he is mentoring these young men in this tradition. Okay, what else? And finally, we granted some money to CCUU Building and Grounds to provide an awning for this door, I think, because the rain was coming in, and as you can see, it was rotting, and so we're going to be able to put the awning up, fix the door. So these were all good things. And I want to really thank y'all all for supporting our endowment and encourage you to donate to the endowment. And if you did donate last year, I have sent those acknowledgments and thank yous went out in January through email mostly. So if you did not get one and you donated, please let me know. I will correct that situation. And if you have any other questions about it, you can let me know, contact me. My information is in that weekly email blast. And I just want to thank y'all again for your support for the endowment. All right.
Okay, and now we have another announcement that's going to be for you. It's from our membership ministry, and we're going to have Marilyn Malone who's going to tell you what's going on with that.
Well, good morning, and it's so good to see everyone here. Membership ministry has been busy, believe it or not. We've been doing a lot of things behind the scenes on Zoom. we'd like to welcome our many visitors today and want to announce that for anyone who is interested in learning more about our church, we're having a newcomers informational meeting today at 2 o'clock on Zoom. The link is in Community Matters, our weekly email announcements, a newsletter. But if you want to join us, see me after church, and I can give you the link also then to hook up with us this afternoon at 2 o'clock. But this won't be your only chance. We will be doing many more of these Zoom meetings. We're going to be trying to do them at least once a month on the first Sunday of every month, have an informational meeting which is open to anyone who wants to know more about our church. Now, if you don't have Zoom and you don't do Zoom, we can make arrangements to do this, to meet with you another way. Just contact our group at membership@ccuunola.org, or you can call the church and ask and leave a message, and we can get you hooked up with a meeting another way. Okay. Now, next Sunday, which is going to be very exciting, on February 27th, starting from now on to the last Sunday of every month, during the service, we're going to be having a new member ceremony for anyone who's ready to make a commitment to join our church. We have several people who have expressed an interest in this, and so this coming Sunday, next Sunday, we're going to have a membership ceremony. If you would like to participate, again, contact membership at CCUUNOLA.org, or call the church, or see me after church, and I'd be glad to chat with you about that. We're going to be having another opportunity and another membership joining ceremony during the service on March 27th, which is the last Sunday of the month. That one's definitely set up too. So I know Mardi Gras is interfering a lot with people doing things after church, particularly, or even coming to church. So we'll have these opportunities after Mardi Gras. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to do just a little bit of an introduction for our speaker today. Most of you already know her. She's been a member here for a while. She gave me some notes. She first joined the UU Church in NOLA, first UU Church in NOLA in 1977. She's got a BA in journalism from Loyola University and a master's an MA in English from the University of New Orleans, and she taught at Delgado Community College for 18 years. Retiring in 2005, a little note here, after she lost her house in NOLA, a little thing called Katrina, she moved upriver to Donaldsonville, and she publishes books by Louisiana authors through her company, DeVille Press. I just thought you should know all of the things that she's still doing, because some of us never know how to retire. Okay, so now we're going to move from there to our chalice lighting, because that's where we are. Okay, so I see some choir members here, so I'd like to hear some. So I know you're all masked, but let's hear it. Okay. And Nicholas? And now we will have our time for all ages with Our RE Director, Cynthia Ramirez.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to see faces. Okay, I just want to remind everybody, the crew of Kids for Change, if you have any change in your pocket, you can drop it into the bucket here, since I have people here. Yay! Also, you can give online. The address is in the Community Matters, and where you can see, you can do it online if you want to. But if you have some change, you can just drop it on throughout the service or after. And this will be, next week will be the final week, and we're giving to the organization, I forget what it is, but it's to help the homeless. The children voted to participate in giving the monies that we collect to this organization. Okay, so this morning, I'm going to talk to you about one of New Orleans' most famous residents. Unfortunately, he passed a few years back, but I think we all remember him, and especially his voice, Mr. Okra. And this is called Mr. Okra Sells Fresh Fruit and Vegetables. In the morning when the sun rises, Mr. Okra drives his bright red truck through the streets of New Orleans, selling fresh fruit and vegetables. I got oranges, I got bananas, Mr. Okra sings. His voice is deep and strong, like the musical notes played at the concert in Mahalia Jackson's arena. I got peaches, pears, and apples. The P's sound in each word keeps the rhythm like the drums in Congo Square. I got asparagus. Mr. Okra's asparagus are thin and tall like the steeples of St. Louis Cathedral. I got broccoli. His heads of broccoli are lush like the Mediterranean fan palms planted in Jackson Square. I got eggplant. The skin of the eggplant is as dark as the coffee at Café du Monde. I got blueberries. His blueberries are the color of the big blue doors at the Louisiana Children's Museum. I got cantaloupes, I got mangoes, I got strawberries, I got grapes. All of Mr. Okra's fresh fruit and vegetables are colorful like the magical floats of Mardi Gras world. I got watermelon. Mr. Okra's watermelons are green on the outside, just like the St. Charles streetcar, and red on the inside, just like the streetcar on Canal Street. I got sweet corn on the cob. Mr. Okra's sweet corn blooms like flowers in New Orleans botanical gardens. I got spinach. I got collard greens, I got mustard greens, I got potatoes, garlic, and onions. I got tomatoes, cucumbers, and avocados. Mr. Okra has so many fresh fruits and vegetables. They are as different as the animals in Audubon Zoo. At the end of the day, when Mr. Okra is done selling fruits and vegetables, he drives in his bright red truck carrying his produce like a big cargo ship on the Mississippi River. Thank you.
It's time now for our offering. Okay? Community Church Unitarian Universalist is a self-sustaining congregation. Members' and friends' generosity help us to do the sacred work of bringing justice, spirituality, and compassion to our community and beyond. You can give online at ccuunola.org/stewardship or by text at 504-370-2659 and text GIVE. You can also send us a check at 6690 Fleur de Lis Drive, New Orleans 70124. And for those of you who are here today, you can give in person. Thank you so much. I'm going to do a reading now, and for those of you at home that are thinking about trying to put in your joy and sorrow, you can start on that right now. But this is from the presidential inauguration address of Barack Obama from January 20th of 2009. Because we have tasted the bitter swill of civil war and segregation and emerged from that dark chapter stronger and more united, we cannot help but believe that the old hatred shall someday pass, that the lines of tribes shall soon dissolve, that as the world grows smaller, our common humanity shall reveal itself. And now it's the time for the joys and sorrows. It's a sacred time. If you have a need to share with this community, whether it be expressing something that weighs heavy on your heart these days, or letting us know what reason there is to celebrate, please write your messages in the chat box to be read aloud after our musical interlude. If you're here in the church, let us know if you've got something that you want to say. Okay?
Say
Not sure if there were any joys and concerns sent in over the internet. Anybody? None? Okay. Anybody here have something they would like to say? Come on up here. Just do it this way.
Hi, everybody. I just wanted to follow up on what Jolie said about the endowment and to let you know, although they're not here, how grateful Ed Buckner and the Red Flame Hunters are. If anybody wants to help with last-minute beading and getting ready, they could, if you know, would like to get involved, you can see me after. I can hook you up with that. And they will be heading out at 1823 Elysian Fields around 10:30 or 11 Mardi Gras Day if you'd like to see them. And I'll put something in the Community Matters about that. And I also bring thank you from Rosa and her family, her 4 kids. This church has just been integral in their survival, really. And they did go through COVID last month, and she couldn't leave, and people stepped up. So I thank you, and they thank you.
I'm joyful Liz is back. Thank you.
For those of you at home, Jolie just said she was glad that Liz is back, and we are all glad to see Liz again. Okay. Have another one? Okay.
I'm very happy to announce that Walter's book on the Catahoula has been published and is available at Amazon.
For those of you at home that didn't hear that, Walter's book has been published and is available on Amazon. What's the title of that book?
On the Trail of the Catahoula.
Okay, On the Trail of the Catahoula. Okay. So we've got those. Did you have anything else, Bill? Or?
Yes, Miss Jada Alexandra de Colette is in sorrow that her beloved cat, had died.
Oh. Sorry to hear that. I'm going to put in a couple of joys. One of them, of course, is that Liz is back with us. And there's another one for another Lizzie, Lizzie Jenkins, since we have been out and not being in person. She had fallen and broken her back, got better from that, surprised everybody with how quickly she could recover from it. And then 3 weeks ago or so, she had a heart attack, mild heart attack, but they discovered, it was a good thing that she had it because they discovered a 89% blockage in one of her veins. So they took care of that procedure with a stent, and she's back to doing just fine again. She doesn't have quite the energy she did before, but hey, when you get to be our ages, you didn't have that much energy left anyway. So very happy to say that those are okay. And we will light another candle for the sorrows that are weighing on your heart too heavily to share at the moment. And we will also light another candle for those joys that are bubbling up that you may not be ready to share yet. All right, and now I believe the next thing we've got here, since I've sat down with Herman, this is the wonderful part about electronics. They turn off when you need them to not turn off. Let's see. The order of service here. Let me make sure I get everything in. All right. Okay, well now we go to, did you want to play some more?
Oh, I did.
Well, if you'd like to play a quick interlude, we can do that, because then we're going straight through to the end. We're going to just hit Nicholas with a quick interlude. See, he knows better than to work with musicians. We all have.
Good morning, everyone. It's very nice to be here, and I feel honored to be the speaker for the first service back in person for everyone. And I think most of you know that the topic for today is complex definitions of race in Louisiana, what it means for UUs. In the 1980s and 1990s in New Orleans, many store owners asked their clerks to mark a B on the back of a check submitted by a black person to pay for the bill. I was not aware of this until my coworker at a city agency complained about it one day over lunch. She was a light-complected woman with mostly European features whose appearance would not instantly be thought of as black, quote unquote. She was Creole. Yet she said that over and over clerks in various stores, including the ubiquitous Schweigman supermarkets of the time, asked her point blank if she was black or white. She had been raised to expect and understand the question, as well as the clerk's dutiful marking of a B on the back of her check. "If they can't see what I am, why even ask?" she said, with a weary, irritated expression that elicited an empathetic nod from several of us at the table. Only in Louisiana would this conversation have come up. A century after Reconstruction, and 30 years after Jim Crow laws were banned, racial divides in New Orleans were as muddled and hurtful as ever, as they had always been. Although I didn't know my coworker's racial makeup as a Creole any better than she probably did at the time, the question of an abundance of mixed race or racially ambiguous people in New Orleans, something I had not encountered in northern cities, did make me wonder. Blacks and whites here seemed more intimate with each other across racial lines, as if they had always shared cultural and family ties. There wasn't the hostility of one race toward another that seemed pervasive in northern states where I grew up and had lived before migrating to the Big Easy in 1970. So, for some history. Despite having more slave markets than any other city in the South, New Orleans was also almost conversely one of the most racially mixed cities in the 19th century. As early as the 1740s and 50s, some African slaves were granted their freedom on the death of their master, or they were able to earn the amount of their value and buy their own freedom, something we don't read much about in history books. Property records in the French Quarter prove that in the 1780s and 90s, hundreds of free people of color, the majority of them women, acquired houses and shops there, real estate that they passed to their heirs from one generation to the next. It would take hours to unravel this history, which is why I wrote a book about it. Suffice it to say that in the antebellum years of Louisiana, when fears of civil war were lurking on the horizon, much like the Russians poised on the border of Ukraine today, there were 10,000 free people of color in this city, down from 19,000 a decade earlier. That's half of them had left before thousands migrated to France, Haiti, or Mexico, where discrimination based on skin color was not as much of an issue. This large community of well-educated, middle-class black folks who had never known enslavement themselves made up a middle tier in the Creole society. Their families, long mixed with Native American, Spanish, French, German, Italian, ranged in skin color from the fairest pink to ebony. They were free and enjoyed many privileges of whites, yet they could not vote, they could not hold public office, and they could not marry a white person. 3 key issues. I repeat, they could not vote, they could not hold public office, and they could not marry white. These 3 key issues that, quote, kept them in their place, unquote. The uncomfortable truth is that many of them could and did own slaves, most of them 1 or 2 servants to serve in the household. From the thousands who stayed in New Orleans and thousands more around the state in communities like Point Coupee, Opelousas, Natchitoches, and our own North Shore, Slidell and Lacombe, came the colored troops who fought in the Civil War, and the men who founded L'Union, a black newspaper in 1862, who made up half of the state constitutional convention in 1868, which passed laws banning segregation, and who formed the Citizens Committee in 1873, which led to the famous Plessy v. Ferguson case. Some of them paid with their lives as soldiers in the war, others as activists and protesters in the chaotic 1870s of Reconstruction and the 1880s when fiercely segregated laws were introduced as Jim Crow. And the federal troops left the state, so we were no longer under federal occupation. It is their descendants who have led this city for the past 40 years, including the Landrys. They did not call themselves black or Negro. They were Creole, just like their white neighbors and the enslaved people who worked as cooks, maids, and coachmen in their and their neighbors' households. Creole meant born in the Louisiana colony, as opposed to coming directly from France, Africa, or whatever other native land. It denoted a culture, a language, a cuisine, unique to Louisiana and to the Caribbean, shared by everyone. Only in the late 1800s, when people in our state were forced to identify as to being either black or white, and the old Creole whites began to shy away from identifying as Creole because it could also include blacks. Today, the term is generally used almost exclusively by Creoles with some African ancestry. So, given that history, where do we as Unitarian Universalists fit into this often misunderstood situation of race in Louisiana? Well, we've been here since 1856, which is a good 7 years before the Civil War, as the first Congregational Unitarian Church, founded in 1856. And that grew out of the Strangers Church, which was founded by Presbyterian pastor Theodore Clapp 30 years earlier. Clapp, an apologist for slavery, owned only one enslaved person himself, a man whom he put to work as sexton of the church. There is no indication that the early Unitarian Church attracted any white Creoles, the members and ministers being predominantly Northerners who found themselves in the city on business. According to Meg Dachowski's book, The Strangers Church of New Orleans, to which I am indebted for this history. I knew Meg, and I'm so grateful that she, in her retirement, put together this history of the church. She termed it carpetbaggers Unitarian style. People of color did not figure in the history of the Unitarian Universalists here until a full century later. So we're talking from 1856 up until 1950s. When in 1950, J.P. Bennett from Providence, Rhode Island, a man of color, joined the church, joined First Church. Dachowski writes, Sunday mornings he sat quietly at the rear of the church and did not stay for coffee hour. A few months later, this is now in 1950, the Reverend Albert D'Orlando arrived to assume the pulpit, and shortly thereafter, 2 more blacks joined the church, the male executive director of the Urban League and a woman who was director of the Negro branch of the YWCA, both organizations active in the city at the time and very prominent in integration later on. These new members not only stayed, I should mention they were not from here, they were also Northerners who had come down. These new members not only stayed for coffee hour, but fully expected to participate in all activities of the church. 2 Sundays later, the cupboard that held the ceramic coffee cups was found padlocked, and someone had to be dispatched to the closest K&B. Those of us of older years remember that was our CVS or Walgreens. They had to be dispatched to the closest K&B for paper cups so that coffee hour could proceed. Word got out about blacks attending the church, which put everyone at risk of arrest, as interracial meetings of any kind were illegal in the early 1950s. Not to mention made the church building and its members vulnerable for recriminations from angry segregationists. In the ensuing years, Dorlando's home was firebombed, although he and his wife, who were there at the time, escaped harm. And in the early 1960s, the church, spurred by funds donated by other UU congregations, paid for the legal fees of the late member Lanny Goldfinch, some of you remember him, who was arrested at a sit-in on Canal Street. The fund also paid to house freedom riders who came to the city and helped with legal challenges of the integration of Tulane University, and ran radio spots urging white parents to send their children to public schools, because as we know, once the public schools were integrated, it was white flight. White people pulled their children out of school. So the church ran these periodic spots urging whites to send their children to public schools. Integration of First Church UUU in New Orleans was not the only controversy Dorlando faced in the 1950s. Secular humanism was hotly debated, as was freedom of the pulpit and modernization of methods of worship. I need hardly remind this audience that we are here today in this congregation as the result of the split with First Church in 1960 over a combination of all of the above. The AUA, which is the precursor to our umbrella Administrative Unitarian Universalist Association, had only 3 black ministers in 1953. Dorlando was appointed to a committee to rectify that imbalance and, in general, make congregations more welcoming to minorities. Fortunately, things have progressed steadily since then in terms of including people of color in our churches. But in New Orleans, as many places elsewhere, our African American peers still do not know much about us, or when they do, they fail to perceive us as inclusive of race. When people enter our sanctuary and see no one who looks like they do, their conclusions are predictable, and they often do not return, no matter the friendly greeting they receive. We also should recognize that although the UUs in New Orleans have not historically included many local blacks, whether Creole or not, and have in fact held racist views until about 70 years ago, and some well beyond that, there have been a number of wealthy white members who contributed financially to social and political causes that have benefited African Americans. Edward Wisner is but one of these. His namesake, the Wisner Tract, a 100-acre stretch of empty land once filled by a golf course in City Park around Harrison and Wisner Boulevard, also named for him, has been in the news in recent weeks because the city is fighting over what will be developed there. Wisner and his family were longtime members of First Church. Their daughter, Elizabeth Wisner, founded the School of Social Work at Tulane University. The tract was part of Edgar Wisner's will in 1914, leaving the expanse of land to the city to build facilities for mendicants, which was their word at the time for homeless people. He also envisioned a home for retired school teachers. I guess school teachers didn't fare any better than in those days than they do now. And also one for retired policemen. And to provide a recreational space open to all. Wisner stipulated in his will that race was not to be a factor, even though he knew that Jim Crow laws would defeat that idea, at least at the time. Income from this tract of land has accrued through the years to the city and financed many, many public programs that we're not even aware of because it doesn't come up in the news. To conclude, our second UU principle is justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, which we interpret to mean everyone in the human race, regardless of color. Our history shows us that we have a long way to go here in New Orleans. In this Black History Month, we should turn our attention to what more we can each do. We should start with understanding the race history of our own city and state, and move out from there to embrace the national and social activist movements that will, they must, eventually make this shameful past forgotten, or at least forgiven, by those who have been aggrieved. We should become more like children in this quest. I recall my son, this was in the mid-'80s, I would say. I recall my son in 3rd grade when he came home after the first day at Dybert Elementary School, a public and very diverse school. And I asked him who his new teacher was. He replied, Mrs. Dennis. I knew most of the teachers, but I couldn't quite picture Mrs. Dennis. Is she white or black? I asked him. After a quizzical pause, he exclaimed, she's brown. Of course. Of course. We should strive to see everyone in our world as shades of tan and brown, a truly Unitarian Universalist concept. And now I'd like to conclude with a reading, which is the epilogue of a book that came out not too long ago. Some of you are familiar with it, called Tearing Down the Lost Cause by 2 New Orleans writers, James Gill and Howard Hunter. And in this reading, there's mention of 2 gentlemen. One is called Andre Caillou, who was a Creole captain of the Corps d'Afrique, which fought at Port Hudson, and he was killed there in that battle. His body lay on the battlefield for days because the fighting was so fierce that he couldn't be retrieved. And P.G.T. Beauregard, we've heard of him and his statue, who obviously was head of some of the Confederate troops. The authors say, but history cannot be willed or washed away. And if New Orleans has always contained a multitude of voices, what about the descendants of the vanquished, both Union and Confederate? In a 2015 article in the Daily Beast, the author, Jason Berry, also of New Orleans, called for a forest of ancients in the New Orleans City Park that would include the Confederate statues along with effigies honoring freedom fighters among the African American dead. Let the ghost of our violent past surround one another in bronze, he said. Do Andre Caillou and P.G.T. Beauregard have a place next to each other in that forest of ancients as symbols of the American Iliad? Certainly, a Caillou-Beauregard memorial could shed some light on the complexity of that elusive thing we call the past. Together, they could provide a roadmap for a city to engage a rich and agonizing history. To move forward free of the past may lift a burden, but it will hardly make us more enlightened. I'd like to repeat that last line. To move forward free of the past, it's behind us, forgotten, gone, it may lift a burden, but will hardly make us more enlightened. Unless, of course, we really study it and understand it. Thank you for your being a very good audience. For those musical renditions. I know he, on purpose he chose them because they are, if not the actual pieces, they're very, very similar to those written by Creole composers, both white and...
Artie Matthews.
No, which one was?
They were both by Artie Matthews. They were both pastime rags by Artie Matthews.
Uh-huh.
Pastime rag 1 and pastime rag number 5.
Okay, there were several free men of color who were major composers. I just wanted to...
Okay, and now we have the benediction. Okay. I wrote this benediction. I want to make sure everybody hears it. It's called The Interconnected Web of Life Knows No Racial Distinctions. We are all aware of the differences between people. There's race, religion, political ideologies, social customs, and so many other factors. But for all of these differences, we are all here on and of the same planet. That's what makes the interconnected web of life. Look around and focus on the similarities rather than the differences. Go out into that interconnected web, and although it could stand some improvement, enjoy what a fabulous place this world is, and do your best to make it just a little bit better each and every day. Namaste, shalom, go in peace.